Hello and welcome to Scaling a CBD Brand Globally. I'm Layla Simpson, the Innovation Director of the Association for the Cannabinoid Industry. And with me, I have Andy Duckworth, the co-founder and CEO of NatureCan, and Paul Finnegan, the co-founder and director of NatureCan. Thank you very much to the Cannabist for hosting, and welcome to CBD Live. So Paul and Andy, lovely to have you here with me today. Thank you for recording this video for us. I wonder if you could just each say a few words about yourselves and sort of what brought you to this industry. Andy, would you like to go first?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Layla. So hi, guys. Andy Duckworth, CEO and co-founder of NatureCan. My background prior to this is I was CEO of myprotein.com for 6 years and successfully grew that business with the help of a great team to global leader in the wellness space, and then moved on to CBD after a short gap. Was lucky enough to meet Paul Finnegan, and from that we set NatureCan up in May 2019, and we've spent the last more or less 2 years working on NatureCan and sort of arguing between us on the strategy. Do you want to go for it, Paul?
Yeah. So, yeah, Paul Finnegan, fellow co-founder of NatureCan. I've got a bit more of an entrepreneurial background, drinks and property and a couple of other bits. I was lucky enough, the best day of my life, to meet Andy Duckworth a couple of years ago. And basically the couple of years before that, I've been looking into the cannabinoid industry, looking at CBD, visiting extractors all over the States, and had found a fantastic oil source. And as I say, luckily enough, met Andy through one of our investors to start NatureCan.
Wow, fantastic. What a night or day that must have been when you two met.
On a football pitch, actually.
Yeah, it was a game. It was a game of football. So yeah, it was a good event for sure.
Well, listen, everyone out there, you never know which random game of football might change your life forever and catapult you into the CBD industry, like these two. I actually came to the CBD industry through the medical cannabis route. I started originally was working in politics, and we were running a bit of a campaign on medical cannabis, which introduced me to this whole world. And then I worked with medical cannabis patients to run campaigns to let them access their medicine, which then introduced me to the whole world of cannabinoids and what a big, exciting world it is. So that's how I've ended up with the Association for the Cannabinoid Industry. Fantastic. Yeah, it's interesting. We've all sort of come from all of our different areas and ended up with real mix.
I think that is the thing about the cannabinoid industry. There is a mix from all different sides, and different agendas as well. Obviously the ACI and the CMC as the other wing to the more on the medicinal side and that campaigning side. And then, we look at CBD and cannabinoids as a wellness product. It's a wellness ingredient and everything in between, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. It spans a few different areas, doesn't it? So today we're definitely focusing on the wellness market, but CBD does occupy a few spaces for different purposes and different people. Yeah, it's a very interesting little compound to work with, isn't it?
Definitely. Definitely.
So if I can ask you just a bit about scaling a CBD brand globally, from the day you met on the football pitch to now, I mean, you've grown amazingly. But I was wondering, from your previous experience of scaling large e-commerce brands, particularly, and MyProtein, we'd love to hear a bit more about MyProtein. What would you be able to apply from your prior experience? And is there anything about CBD particularly that makes it quite challenging or different in any other way?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess the challenge is obviously the regs, which we all sort of know about and talk about a lot. But in terms of the similarities, there's plenty. You know, the fundamentals are putting the customer first, you know, building a really high quality product that's built on high quality supply chain, transparency, testing of the product, the quality of the raw ingredients that go into the product. And then, you know, as you grow, it's keeping up with your customer service requirements, your fulfillment. You know, if you want to scale something globally, it's quite a clear playbook, you know, and you need to make sure that everything scales in line, you know, in terms of looking after your customers and giving them a good service and a high quality product. So in that respect, you know, all very similar to what we sort of executed at MyProtein. So yeah, there's differences, but there's a lot of similarities as well. And when you think about the product, you know, it's an ingestible. You can take it as a vape. You can take it in all the sort of similar formats that you can take, you know, wellness products in. So the supply chain that, you know, I was lucky enough to benefit from and be a part of while running MyProtein has proved very sort of totally relevant and useful in this journey. So loads of similarities.
And what would you say is the main difference? The regulations you mentioned?
Yeah, the regulations are there, but again, you know, regulations exist in wellness and exist in supplements as well. So, you know, you know, the regulations are clearly different. You need to know them, but again, you can apply the same learnings, you know, a matrix approach, you know, by country, by product, and you know, just make sure you're ticking the boxes and going above and beyond, you know, where you need to. And again, you know, testing of your products and understanding what goes into them, you know, the same fundamentals exist again. So, you know, it's different in terms of the rules that you're playing by, but again, in terms of the fundamentals, very, very similar.
Really interesting. And just out of interest, when you were at MyProtein, did you ever encounter novel foods process?
Very, very rarely. There was the odd, you know, requirement to understand what the MHRA needed for some herbal remedies and that sort of thing. But, you know, generally, you know, protein was, you know, what it does what it says on the tin. You know, it's a great macro. It's a great ingredient, really, that, you know, more and more of the population take and want to experience. And again, very similar with CBD. And, you know, it's just, you know, a little bit earlier on, I guess, in that life cycle. So you've got to find ways to educate the customer, and we know the challenges around that with CBD. But ultimately, because it's such an amazing compound, you know, that is just growing and growing because it works. So word of mouth for now, you know, is a very relevant and valuable form of marketing. And ultimately, if you've got a product that works, you know, then, you know, sort of happy days, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I bet you're more than familiar with the novel foods process now. Now you've moved into CBD. We've all gone on this journey together. Huh?
Yeah, we are now. Paul will probably talk about it at more length than I will. But yeah, we've lived and breathed novel food, you know, for the last 18 months. But it's something we've embraced, and I'm sure Paul wants to say a bit more on it.
Yeah, I think just as Andy says, the sort of where protein is such far more mature in the market, and we're still getting these regulations put in place. And even, you know, the UK theoretically is further ahead than anybody with this novel food process and everything else. So yeah, that it will get easier, I'm sure, as time goes on, but it's so new, the product, and we're just scratching the surface with it.
Absolutely. It's always difficult to be part of the first cohort that goes through a process, and we have been part of the first cohort to go through the novel foods regulations for CBD. So hopefully it will become simpler and easier. But you know, we're also making history by doing this, and as you say, being the first country in the world to regulate. So yeah, interesting time.
And it's what we want. We all want, you know, the safest possible market for consumers. It's what it's all about.
Absolutely. So on the topic of regulations, can you tell me any more of how you've adapted to the challenges of these different markets having different regulations? There's so much red tape around you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so we've looked at it from a sort of top-down approach and understood, you know, the regulations in each market that we, you know, wanted to enter. But we have found that there's, you know, a couple of common themes that run through everything. You know, one of which is understanding, how much THC, you know, is in the CBD. That's something that we're really well positioned on. So, you know, all our products are a broad spectrum distillate. So that gives us an advantage, we feel, in terms of giving consumers, you know, what they want. They want a, you know, from what we understand, you know, a plant-based natural product, you know, with as much of the entourage effect in there as possible. And that's something we're able to give. But we're very lucky in the fact that Paul spent 2 years in the States before we met, and found this incredible source of CBD that has really, really low THC. So we're able to hit the regulations, you know, where over the globe, really.
Yeah. So just picking up on that, as Andy says, it's making sure that we're in the place in the most regulated markets, and then anything that's, you know, looser on THC, CBN, we're already obviously well inside it. But, you know, the chromatography, that process that we go through means incredibly low THC, incredibly low CBN, but we've still got CBG in there, CBC, and creating that sort of entourage effect.
Really interesting. So it sounds like you've got a very good source in your travels there.
Yeah, you know, it's going to see a hell of a lot of, you've got to kiss a lot of frogs, as they say. And I visited all sorts, you know, some that are doing a hell of a lot of volume that just weren't up to the standard that we require in the, you know, in the UK. So yeah, very pleased to find it, and the product's developed as well as we've gone, so it's getting better all the time. And I think I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but it's the future as well. And the lab that we work with are very keen on working on the next cannabinoids coming through and everything else as well. So all sort of key to us for our product pipelines.
Oh, wonderful. I will definitely ask you about the future. I'm very excited to hear about your thoughts for the future. So we'll get to that a little bit later. But yeah, really interesting. And as we know, it's incredibly important to keep on top of those THC levels, because, you know, we've seen seizures at airports, and it seems to be a common thread that the THC level is too high in products coming into the country. So it sounds like you're definitely onto a good thing there. Now, but we've all been through that. Coming back to the regulatory process that we've all been through in the last few years, really. It's been quite a challenging environment to be in. There's been a lot of different information floating around, a lot of different expectations. We've heard some different things from government bodies in this process. We've all tried to keep on top of it, but it's meant that the CBD industry has been a bit of an uncertain place to exist within. And I was wondering, with all this uncertainty, was raising capital very difficult for you? And how did you make your investors feel a bit more confident that the CBD space was a space worth investing in?
Yeah, so I mean, initially, you know, we put a lot of work into our investors, because our initial investors were each other. So we backed this gig with our own money from the start, and yeah, we invested, you know, a decent amount of capital each. But once we, I guess, you know, built the infrastructure and got a sales run rate, you know, raising capital then becomes more straightforward. You know, we are lucky enough to have, you know, really, really high quality and supportive sort of cornerstone investor, and then we've taken some money, you know, from some smaller angels as well. But initially, yeah, we used our own funds, and you know, I think that speaks volumes as well to other investors, because if you put your money where your mouth is, you know, people want to get involved.
How about you, Paul? Did you speak with the investors?
Yeah, I think there is some uncertainties in the market, but I also think that, you know, the genie is out now, out the lamp. You know, there's so many people using CBD, and if you Andy's track record is spectacular as well. It's difficult for him, you know, obviously, to say it without trying to sound humble, but that obviously encourages investments in this space. And with the sort of with that uncertainty comes opportunity. There's going to be some incredibly big winners in the race, and I think, you know, we'll see, we saw last week from, or a couple of weeks ago, EMAC Life Science as well, and more in the medicinal space, but then receiving 300 a buyout for sort of 300 million pounds. There's a hell of a lot of cash moving around in this market if you've got the right business.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And now we've sort of reached a bit of a turning point within the industry as well, where there is more certainty. Do you think that there might be more confidence from investors coming up now that we've passed this sort of the extension to the deadline, and now, you know, we're in a position where there are some products going to be starting to be taken off shelves soon? Sorry, that was a very clear question.
I think that yeah, no, I think that for a lot of the sort of bigger institutional investors, because the big boys are going to come into the game in the UK now, the sort of Tesco's and all of the rest of it, they're going to be, you know, I'm sure, putting branded CBD products on the shelves. So there's some very investable businesses. And I think we're also going to see a lot of cash from the States, where there's been a lot of investment go into different sort of cannabis businesses, right the way sort of from hemp, medicinal, recreational, where we're actually got our legal platform and everything else now. There's a market for investment where it's not a grey market, as they, you know, sort of call it in the States. This is a legitimate, approved by the FSA market.
Yeah, with the UK taking, if you will, the lead, you know, in regulation, it's going to lead to a market consolidation over here, which is, you know, which is lucky, I guess, or, you know, for the guys who are well positioned. And it is a bit of a shame, small players who maybe couldn't afford novel food or didn't go through the process, and, you know, definitely got sympathy with that. But I guess in terms of the question, you know, and cash coming into the industry, you know, we firmly believe it will follow, it will happen.
Yeah, I think it will certainly be a very interesting year in the CBD space to see how people respond to this. And as we start getting those first authorized products, which means they're fully legally available, and seeing some of these other products maybe starting to be taken off shelves when they haven't submitted a novel foods application, it's certainly going to be interesting. And I know that, you know, from my experience working with people who consume CBD for various reasons, wellness being one of them, I know how much some people are really relying on getting a real good quality product. And novel foods, you know, for all its foibles, does mean that that person walking into a high street shop and picking up a bottle of CBD can feel much more confident that it is what it says on the label, and that it's not full of contaminants, and, you know, it's actually got the CBD in it. And at the end of the day, the consumers are why we're here, right? That's the thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the, you know, that leads on to the next point really, where in terms of, you know, advice that maybe could be given to entrepreneurs, etc. I think it's put your consumers first. You know, you're absolutely nothing without your customers. That's the whole reason why we're here. You know, to give customers a high quality product that they can believe in, that works, that can improve their life. Give them that transparency, give them a high quality service, and you know, I think that should be the cornerstone, you know, of any brand, and any successful brand. If you look after your customers and put them first, you know, every opportunity, I think that's all, you know, they can ask really, and that's what you should be looking to deliver.
Yeah, that's really useful advice there. Thank you so much, Andy. Paul, I wonder if you've got any comments for me, any advice that you'd give to any entrepreneurs or brands looking to set up within the CBD space?
Yeah, I think, you know, I've had a big learning curve myself on e-com, and over the last couple of years working with Andy, and it's all about customers. You've got to look after your customers. And, you know, Andy's CEO of the business, he makes sure that he's totally on top of the customer service. He keeps himself copied in on the emails. He must get 1,000 emails a day, of 2,000 of various things, but it's keeping that level of, you know, happiness. Repeat rate for a customer is the best way to grow your business. You know, I think that's probably the biggest thing I've learned over the last couple of years within e-com as well.
Wow, thank you for sharing. That's pretty incredible, Andy, that volume of emails, but also just really keeping touch with what's going on at the ground level, you know, what conversations these customers are having with NatureCan. And yeah, I think that's really impressive,
Yeah.
actually.
Well, I mean, I enjoy it and the staff enjoy it. Again, it is all about the customer and just seeing, what your customers are saying, what they're looking for, what they think of your products, what they think of your service. I think customers are very forgiving if there's a problem, fulfillment or something, as long as you're honest with them, you treat them right financially, and resend the products, whatever. So, people are generally very decent. They bought off you for a reason, to get a benefit from the product, and as long as you do your best to get the product to them, treat them correctly, generally everything ends up nicely. So yeah, it's something that does run through the business, and it's something we're pretty proud of.
Yeah, that's really good to hear from you guys. And I'm sure that any customers out there would feel heartened knowing that you're so in touch with them at the ground level. So just we've spent a bit of time discussing, regulations and what the CBD industry was like, and including what's recently happened, and the FSA sort of closed the deadline for the extension. You can still apply to have a CBD product on the market, but you'd need to go now through and sort of end-to-end authorization. You're not allowed to keep your products on the market if you've not already submitted an application. But so now we're in this interesting sort of situation where we soon will have a list of CBD products that are able to be sold. So they're people who have sent in an application to the FSA. And we've achieved the deadline. It's kind of, I don't want to say calm down, but we've achieved that milestone, and now there's a very, especially amongst the ACI members and at the ACI, we are starting to look to the future of not just CBD, but what else is in this space. So I'm going to ask you guys one by one. Andy, you're up first. What do you think the next trend is, one of the next trends in cannabinoid wellness, and what are your predictions for that trend?
I know Paul will be disappointed that I got asked first. I can reach for the easy answer, and I'm going to go with CBG. So this will test Paul's knowledge on the remaining cannabinoids. But yeah, we think CBG is probably the next cannabinoid, to get interest levels, growing. We can see those trends on Google increasing every day, and the education starting to go out there on CBG. So that's my stock answer.
Yeah, no, and definitely agree with that. The other one, CBC, starting to sort of come down in price now as well, from, again, because the improvements in the way it's the genetics and the way it's being extracted and everything else. The same thing that happened with CBG when it was, 2.5 years ago, $50,000 a kilo, as opposed to now where it's come down significantly. But just your other point, Layla, as well, about full authorization, it's an interesting one, because we've got products that have got months of stability behind them now, that we couldn't, obviously, because of the February cutoff point, keep them on the UK market. But we will be putting those products through authorization, and many more. We've got an NPD pipeline, which this is, I think, where eventually this process will become a quicker time, because we've got all the data that's required pretty much already on these products. Well, we have got the data, not pretty much. So, but we still have to go through the full authorization. So there's a hell of a lot still to go with CBD and some supplementary ingredients that we're putting with them as well. But as Andy says, we've already started on CBG in a major way, and CBC, we believe in the cannabinoids coming through and the research. We spend significant amounts of cash with Liverpool John Moores University as well, funding studies, funding PhD students, funding prof-doc students to learn as much as we can about all of these different cannabinoids, how they interact with different things, humans, pain, sleep, all of these other things. So we're definitely a forward-looking business in this space.
Yeah, well, you absolutely seem to be, and including on the research front as well, which is really great to hear. That have you partnered with the university there to do the research?
Yes, so what we've done is we've been funding the PhD students, because there's been a huge interest in this over the last couple of years for students at the university, but not many people want to spend the cash on doing it. They we couldn't have done it when it was just me and Andy funding it as well before we had any sales. So it's not a sort of case of, look at us, but it's massively important that we've got this research for the whole industry. We don't look at others as competitors as well, other CBD brands like this. It's about growing this industry, all of us together. So the more information that we've got about all of these different, benefits of CBD and cannabinoids and everything else, as well as things like, how THC metabolizes in liver over time and things like that. They're very important for the future of this industry, for sportsmen to use it and everything else as well. So it's a collaborative. We're working with Professor Graham Close as well, who, I'm a bit biased, I suppose, but he's pretty much the best regarded nutritionalist around. He's Premier League football. He's placed, half of the nutritionalists in the Premier League football clubs and everything else. They come to him for advice. He's the expert for the rugby, the RFU. Has something to do with the cricket and various different professional, sports teams from all different sectors. And he's got a great interest in this. And if we've got somebody as qualified and as well respected as him, who's pushing this, the research and everything else, we definitely want to get behind him. So, it's a win-win for everybody.
Oh, that's really fascinating to hear. Thank you. It's interesting that you mentioned sport, because I've heard that sport might also be an area where CBD and possibly other cannabinoids could sort of enter into that arena in a bigger way than they have already. Seeing as you met at a football match and you know these nutritionists that work with sports people, I wondered what your take might be on that.
Yeah. So there's a hell of a lot of people using it in sport at the moment. Even a study that was conducted, an anonymous study, found that I think it was 70% of, and it's published this through Liverpool John Moores, I think it's 70% of over 30s elite rugby players have been using this product for, a few times over the last 12 months. The issue is that at the moment, basically a synthetic is the product, the one molecule that's in WADA, which in our opinion is not the best product. By you want that entourage effect, you want those minor cannabinoids and everything else. So part of our research as well is going to be to speak to the UK anti-doping, speak to WADA, these people, and present these findings that because it's massive in sport. Opioids use in the US is a lot of why CBD gained its popularity at the start. It helped it gain traction because people, take these opioid medicines, become addicted, whereas CBD helps, fight the pain, fight the inflammation and everything else. So I think they're definitely coming round to it, but again, they need people like us and others in the industry presenting them with the research to show that these do no harm and do good.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy, did you want to add anything onto that? What's things like from your perspective on sport?
Yeah, I mean, I think Paul's answered it well, but I just think it's as the clarity comes out, with the likes of WADA on all the other cannabinoids and, the unknown territory just, gets removed, if you will, as people understand cannabinoids better. It's symptomatic of the industry that there's just this unknown or unregulated element related to cannabinoids, even still within the UK, because there's a lot more than just THC and CBD, then globally as well. And it's just, it's the world and, areas of the world catching up with the understanding of cannabinoids fully, and that will happen, but it's going to take a good few years.
A good few years and a good lot of research. So I'm really glad to hear that you guys are forging ahead on that. Yeah, because we have for many years been unable to do research on this, so it's all quite a new and exciting area. And just picking up on those other minor cannabinoids, CBG is certainly one that we've been hearing about quite a lot. Quite an exciting one as well, one that could, you know, have an impact on people's wellness. And be appreciated for that. And we think at the ACI, we think that the other minor cannabinoids that are likely to become big markets, as big as or possibly bigger than CBD, we are yet to see. It is likely that they will be treated the same by the FSA as a novel food and require everyone to go through the process that we've just been through for CBD. Now, we at the ACI are thinking about maybe how do we tackle this? How do we remember the lessons that we've learned from going through this whole process and sort of condense it down into like a real pithy application process? That would be lovely, wouldn't it? So we may do things like running a consortium on CBG and starting to develop in that specific area. And then see what other cannabinoids come up, I suppose. It's all to play for in the future.
Yeah, definitely. You know, we'd encourage that as well from the ACI. We'd get involved. I think the sooner the better we start the ball rolling. I think we know now, last time round with novel food, it was, is it going to happen? Isn't it going to happen? There's no doubts really with what they're going to do with this now. So yeah, let's get on with it.
We're ready, FSA.
Yes, definitely.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming along and sharing some advice and wisdom on this video. I'd just like to ask you if you've got any last words really to say to our audience here at CBD Live. Any final thoughts?
Just, I think it's going to be an exciting few years in CBD, you know, and beyond.
Yeah, buckle your seatbelts and let's get ready, because it will be. I think it's going to be a huge industry and we're at the very, very start of it.
Fantastic. Global progress, minor cannabinoids, here we come. So thank you very much, Andrew Duckworth and Paul Finnegan, both from NatureCan. I'm Layla Simpson from the ACI, and you've been watching CBD Live with the Cannabist. Have a lovely rest of your conference.
Thanks, Layla.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.